Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat. Thanks for joining Lorin and I. Lorin, this is one I just get a sense you have been waiting for me to spin on the wheel of questions. So let's go ahead and land on that. Grain or grain-free pet foods? How do you discuss that topic? It's hotly debated. We had a lot of information and misinformation flowing back and forth. I know you and I get asked this all the time. So
All the time.
fire away. I'll let you lead this one.
Yeah, so, it really comes down to a number of factors that have to do with the animal specifically. So when you're talking about cats, it's 100% grain-free. 100% all the time grain-free. There's no purpose. There's no reason. You're talking about an obligate carnivore. Um, it's bad enough that they're eating a highly processed food most of the time and not eating real food. So the very least you could do is to mitigate the dilution of the ingredients um, by not feeding a grain-free. It just doesn't make sense for them. It's fraught with issues for cats. That's not going to be popular, but it's the truth. All you have to do is a little bit of research on how a cat is constructed, what they're supposed to eat, which, by the way, if you want to know what something is supposed to eat, you look at its dentition. And if most people think that dogs and cats chew their food, and they actually don't because they have a hinged jaw. I actually have some jaw models for cats and dogs. Of course I do. Um, and the jaws are hinged. So there's no lateral movement like there is for humans. What looks like chewing is the dogs trying to get purchase on the food by moving it around, making sure it's small enough, breaking it with their teeth to be sure it's small enough to swallow. Um, there's just really no need for grain, and their dentition isn't built for consumption of grain, nor is their digestive tract. Dogs, the issue with dogs is that dogs are facultative carnivores. And what that means is, they adapt. They're adaptive. And all you have to do is participate with a rescue for a few days and see some of what they take in off the streets. And you'll find that oftentimes there are surgeries involved for removing rocks and all kinds of things that dogs have eaten because there's nothing else out there to eat. So they will do what they have to do because they're starving, and they're also at the mercy of being fed by humans. And we have strong opinions as humans over what we think we should feed. If there was one right way to feed, this would not be a debated topic anymore. This
Yeah.
would absolutely be, okay, this is it. This is what is recognized as the perfect way to feed. And this is the only way that we're going to tell people how to do this. But that's not how it goes. So I can tell you what I think, which is really, one person's opinion, which is not worth much at all. But I try to base it on the numerous animals I've had and the animals I've helped, and the hundreds of dogs and cats that have, participated in my store and whose pet parents have come in with issues. Um, I'm not a fan of grain for dogs and cats. Dogs either, because again, hinged jaw. You're not going to find a dog out in a wheat field. They're not instinctively, that's not what they're looking for. If there is nothing else to eat, then yeah, they'll eat whatever they have to, whatever they can get a hold of. But I hate it. I find them to be fillers. I think that the more other ingredients you add, whether it's a processed, highly processed food or a lightly processed food, the more filler ingredients you add, the worse it is for the animal overall. Um, so the reason this is a touchy subject for so many people is because a few years ago we had the whole DCM thing, and a paid spokesperson for a kibble company who happens to be a veterinarian, who that's what she does primarily is she acts as a paid spokesperson, came out and said that there was a study done that proved that dogs who were fed grain-free um, ended up with heart problems. And, of course, nobody digs into the study. And when it finally came to light what the study was about, sometime later, it was like, you know, page 6 on, section D of the newspaper. It just, what didn't get a lot of press. Even the FDA came out and said there was no foundation for it. But it caught traction. It caught fire because we love our animals. And nobody looked at the fact that it was 12 of the same breed of dog. Nobody looked at the way the research was conducted and what specifically the questions were asked of the veterinarians who participated. It's one thing to say, have you seen any issues of, and what were the pet parents feeding? It's another to say, have you seen this issue with grain-free fed dogs?
Yeah.
And, it's like, well, if you're going to put parameters on it where there's only one way to answer it, it convolutes the story, right? It manipulates what the results are going to be. And like everything online, you can search for anything and you're going to get the earth is round, the earth is flat. I mean, there's a million sides to everything. So you can find anything you want to support your position, but there's there's nothing in grain that can help the heart. There's no taurine in it. There's nothing supportive in grain that has any bearing on the heart whatsoever. So it's actually a complete fabrication to say, well, if you add these grains, I don't care if they're ancient, or whatever moniker they're going to be given, there's nothing that in grain that helps the heart. Period. That's not me saying it. This is scientific fact. You can actually do the research yourself and find that. Do you want to feed that? Yeah, you can feed whatever you want. Unfortunately, we have, numerous examples of people feeding all sorts of varieties of different types of food and qualities of food. So you can feed whatever you want. Again, facultative carnivore, your little fur kids are, going to have to deal with whatever it is you give them. But should we be doing that? No.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You hit on so many wide-ranging things there.
Oh my gosh, I could have done another hour on it, but
Yeah, no,
interest of
and
time.
yeah, and I don't mean to cut you off because I want you to continue on. So I think overall too is this is one of those areas that is so confusing because not only do we get mixed messaging in the pet world, we get mixed messaging in the human world. And we carry over so much of that guidance for ourselves into our thinking of what's healthy for our pets. And so when people want me to give them a definitive, I like how you phrased it, there's no benefit, but if you want to keep doing it, by all means, that's your decision for your pet because there is no definitive answer one way or the other. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it. The companies would all shift the way that they make it. That being said, I can say too, there have been some cases that I've been around where, hey, if you're trying to bring down, you've got a diabetic pet and things like that. I have seen some of those ancient grains work. So I'm not going to bash them. But is that my first go-to? Is that something I'm looking for in a food? Absolutely not. And I think overall, as you and I have talked about, the foundation of the health, the more fresh, the more meats, just the better chance you have to over time be balancing but I also want to make sure folks aren't freaking out and going, "Oh my God, I need to cut out grains. I don't need to cut out grains." Yeah, at the end of the day, sometimes that's also very difficult depending on the situation you're at and what you're doing. But there are pathways, and I think what happened in the time frame that you referenced, it was like it threw everything into such chaos, and it
Mhm.
still lives on today. Uh,
Unfortunately.
yeah, which is why, you know, I know you and I, talk about these things, and we go, do we want to, hit on that? Do we not? Because sometimes we feel, okay, the word has gotten out, and we're still surprised how many people still ask. This is one of those topics. I'm still surprised when people will say and quote something that, 3 years ago shouldn't have been as big of an issue as it was, as you've already explained to the audience. So, you know, at the same time, I go back to grain free versus it's got grain in it. I the way things are processed, I doubt even when I see those claims of grain free, because that's just really difficult in some of the processes that people are claiming they're grain free. Because then where are you getting your other fillers that these companies, are putting in? So that's my other part where I go, they claim this, but I mean, you and I see a lot of claims, organic and all the rest of this stuff, that we're like, well, okay, if it was grown in a cave, maybe. And even then, I'd still argue it didn't happen. So grain free, I lean towards as much as possible. But I don't shy away from, and I will say I am one of those folks who will mix in some ancient grains. I've got no problem with it. I love, quinoa and amaranth for a number of different
Well,
reasons.
quinoa is not a grain, it's a seed.
It's a
So
seed,
it feeds
but
like a grain.
it
It
feeds
feeds
like
like
a
a
grain.
grain.
And
Right.
so when I'm looking and I'm taking that label that you and I talk about reading, where are they getting these things? Where are they getting those extra carbs? Where are they getting that feed point? And I know a lot of folks will, go and look up some of the recipes I used to do, and I would use those. And yeah, I'd say it at the time. I'm like, I like this better than the other grains that are out there. So, you know, I also think it just comes back down to when you're looking for what's going on with your pet, it to me often always goes back to the foods. So if you're on a heavy grain food, maybe one of those first pivots that you should be looking at is how much grain is in your pet's diet. Because as we've kind of talked about, that is not something they're out there scavenging for. Um, there's just such a better pathway to go. But I'm a little less stringent because I just see people overreacting on each extreme. This is just another one of those that really frustrates me. And I don't see a lot of grace out there because those who bought into everything a few years ago still have that deeply ingrained in their mantra and their pathway. I'm like, you're wrong. And then there are the others who are like, absolutely never. And I'm like, that's sometimes tough depending on how you're feeding and the pathways. And I know you and I have talked about getting into those processing pathways because that impacts where it's going to be. So when I hear someone say to me, I feed kibble and it's grain free, and I'm like, okay, cool. If that's how you're feeling, awesome. But I think if we were to, dive deep in there, we'd find something. So that's why I struggle with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that specifically, that I agree with that. My bigger issue is, so when the whole thing happened with DCM, it was right before a major trade show.
True and
And
fair.
the rush to market
Right.
by every food company out there who came out with and it was overwhelmingly ancient grains.
Yeah.
And I had a really good friend who works for a food company that he's like, Lauren, let me show you the new food. I'm like, this better not be a grain in food, and he kind of stopped. He goes, well, let me just show you. I was like, listen, does it have ancient grains in it? He goes, yeah. I go, ancient grains. the ancient grains of today look nothing
like
like
they did
what
back then.
ancient grains
Yeah.
were when it was ancient times, because all the food was better back then. All the ingredients, the soil was better,
The
the way things were
soil. Yeah.
done, the lack of the processing, the water, the air, everything was better, better, better.
Yeah.
So take
Agreed.
away that, number one. Number two, there is a significant difference if you're going to feed a grain in food between wheat, corn, and soy.
Mhm.
Soy is not really a grain, but wheat and corn.
Right. But
And
that's the part. I just want to call this out because I don't think we're as different in our thinking and approach. Because here's the problem. If you're going to try and remove all those grains, what are you putting in instead? And I would
well,
argue,
you don't feed kibble then. So
right. But that's where the argument and the opinions fall apart. And I'm just not going to
well, they
educate
put
everybody.
in, instead of grain, they put potato in or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
So
I,
it's not a grain,
yeah.
but they're using obviously something as a binder, because
Correct.
otherwise you can't go through the extrusion process, and
Mhm.
have it hold together. So it's not a grain. It's just another, is it sweet potato? Is it white potato? What
It's peas,
exactly are
it's
they using?
lentils, it's
Peas,
chickpeas.
lentils,
Yeah.
yes. So there's
It's
any number of other options to do that. Are they better? It depends on your kid, and how
and
your
are they
kid,
better in that amount is the other question that doesn't get asked.
well, and if you take a look at, let's just take potatoes, for example. Do you know how many varieties of potatoes there are? The glucose index for all of them is different,
Right.
so it doesn't, a potato is not a potato is not a potato kind of thing.
Correct.
But it's the same thing with the grains. If you're going to feed something with grain, there are better grains to choose than things like wheat and corn. The amount of wheat and corn that is still used in pet food is alarming, because people think like an ear of corn that you took the corn right off of, and because that's what it looks like on the package. First of all, I'm not a fan of feeding corn at all to dogs, but it doesn't look like that. It's the scrapings and the leftover and the not so great pieces and parts of whatever is, not fit for human consumption. So it's not what you're envisioning what is on the package. And when you mentioned diabetes, grain is really a problem for causing a lot of diabetic situations for animals. Form matters. And if the form has a high carb content, or a high grain content, which is usually both, then you're setting your kid up through cumulative consumption for obesity, diabetes, any number of issues.
Right.
So, when you look at, would feeding one meal with rice, that you scrape from your plate do any harm? No, of course not. But it's cumulative consumption. And meal after meal after meal of a grain in food is not giving you any benefits that you're thinking are happening. There's nothing beneficial for the heart. And in fact, is tremendously detrimental, proven to be detrimental as time goes on. Remember, animals change like we do as time goes on. And that change happens rapidly in comparison to us. So as time goes on, their system changes and the meal doesn't. It's the same thing with the same grain consumption all the time, high carbs, high grain intake. And next thing you know, you got what looks like a cute little chubby animal, right? Oh, he's so cute. Oh, I just love, he's just chubby. He's adorable. To now a seriously overweight kid, to then a kid that's got hip and joint problems, to a kid that can't really exercise, but you're going to drag him out because you think that's the answer, is to drag him out and exercise him to get that weight off of him, to a kid that doesn't pass his blood test results well. And nobody looks at the cumulative consumption of that high carb, high grain diet all the time. So I pointed out that quinoa was a seed that feeds like a grain because the translation in the body is not as negative. So if you're going to pick something, that you feel like you want to feed something that's got grain or has a little bit of filler, there are better things out there. But again, the level of processing affects all of that. If you're looking for nutritional value, And it's a highly processed, highly cooked product that's cooked for a long period of time at high temperatures, and you think you're getting much nutrition out of that? Unfortunately, you're not, unless you're adding to the bowl and making it better.
Right. So two things on that. I love that you brought up. You can't out exercise a bad diet. Because we get
Right.
asked that a lot too. Like, should I be adding more exercises? I think Fluffy's getting a little bit more plump. That's not what the issue is, typically. But I think the other thing too, so we get into this discussion, and even you and I have been doing this so far, where we're talking and focused on the food, the food, the food, the food, and yet we forget also the treats. And that is another just overloaded area with heavy grains.
Carbs.
Yeah, where it's just like, so it's layer on layer on layer. So I love that you're talking about listen, over time, you're not giving the body a chance to balance itself out, to expel those things it doesn't need because, oh, hey, I'm doing better here, but maybe I'm still using those same, carb heavy, grain heavy treats. It's like, oh man, you missed the mark. And I know the intention was not that. And so I think that's why this is a good conversation. Um, and again, if this was something that there was one way to do it, we'd all be doing it. The big companies would be doing it, the little companies would be doing it. I just go back to if we share the knowledge, hopefully you're going to make the best decision for your pet because it is a big decision. This is a very big decision in the overall health of your pet. And I think that's why, at least from my standpoint, the big swings that happen and oh, it's got to be this way, it's got to be that way, not just with grain versus grain free, but, we just see all of these, like something catches fire because, like what happened a few years ago, someone points to some study and, again, and I love that. I think that's another important call out to this whole thing too, is asking the questions is not just about, hey, what's in the bag and what's on the label? What was the justification for making those decisions? And when you're pointing to those studies, yeah, I think the joke within industry insiders is, was it more than 12? Because
Right, right.
it's like,
Was it a different breed? Did they mix up the breeds?
is
Did it
there
last longer
any
than
kind of
six
variety?
weeks?
Yeah,
Yeah, was it a study that went longer than 6 weeks? Like, this other one didn't.
yeah.
But again,
And
doesn't it
unfortunately
always
though,
come down to
yeah, that was it. And
rotation?
yeah, and that's been for the longest time. Um, there's just not a lot of studies funded unless there's a purpose behind the funder funding it.
Yep.
And so,
And that was the situation that this was. When you followed the money to look at who was behind the funding,
yeah,
it became crystal clear. And unfortunately, the consumer doesn't get to dig into that, doesn't get to see that, and they're just panicked. They're
right.
like, oh my God, I had people
Well,
stand in
we're
my
and
store crying.
yeah, and this is not meant to offend anybody, but we are a headline society. You know,
Right.
Twitter made it so that it was a character society of 140 some odd characters, and hey, now we've got this and we've got that. I mean, that's the reality, and I don't think anybody out there is not wanting the info. Hopefully, as you're listening to Lauren and I, you're realizing you can ask questions, you can do your own research to dive deeper into these things and challenge those people who are giving you, including Lauren and I, the advice, because that is what it is. It's advice. At the end of the day, I get asked it probably a couple times a day, especially when people get to know that I do things in the pet world. To be like, hey, what's the best pet food? Hey, what's the? And I'm just like, the best is whatever your being does best on, because I'm not going to go through this is a full educational thing. This is one of those areas too, where, there are a lot of nutrition classes out there online. And,
Oh,
I sit there and I've taken plenty of them. You don't see them listed on any of my,
no.
but I want to know what people are saying. I want to understand it. And the good about it is elevating your knowledge is something I'm such a huge advocate of. And I want to see more of that. The problem is where you're getting the knowledge, who's delivering it, what's their angle, what's their bend.
The bias.
I typically will see that fairly quickly, and it's something that is disappointing to me because I think all of us really do want to do better, and I see that in those that speak out, and sometimes those that are the loudest. And the thing that I would say is go back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and see what those people were saying. That doesn't mean we shouldn't evolve our opinions and our thinking, but give yourself some grace too. I mean, I've had people crying because,
Yeah,
oh my
me
God,
too.
I fed, this to my last, 10, dogs. And it's like, you did what you knew. Did you know what you know now? And that's that whole thing is we get better as time goes on, we get more information. It's a shame that there are not more studies out there that are not as biased as maybe they have been in the past. The funding, I don't know why it's not there, but it's not. And there are groups who are doing those things. And it's not just in
Well,
the nutrition, we see it in cognitive and training and other things, but we still have a long way to go.
yeah, the funding's not there for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
because the people with the deep pockets don't want the funding to be there. The only funding that's there is the funding that suits their purposes. It really comes down to the same old thing that it always comes down to, which is rotational feeding, feeding different things in
Yeah.
different amounts. I had people break down crying in my store after this headline hit, who thought, oh my God, I've been feeding grain-free for the last 5 years. And I'm like, and the last blood tests, what did they tell you? Well, they were fine, but I'm afraid of what's going to come. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the disservice that this did to the pet lover community out there of people who, who do everything they can for the well-being of their animals, and then to have this thrown at them like you've probably been killing your dogs by feeding them grain free. It's like, what is wrong with you? That isn't even true. It doesn't even have any basis in fact. Why would you make people feel that way? So, I mean, I had people that for a while would go back and forth between grain in and grain free. And that would have been terrible for me to say, I think this is the wrong thing to do. I guided them with the
Yeah.
best grain in that, that they could choose, from what I offered. And, I stayed steady with I don't think you're going to see any reason for this. And I gave them links and gave them research and gave them things to look at to say, okay, you decide. Go look and see what heart healthy properties come from grain that you think in some way are going to support your animal. And then you decide. And I had people come in and say, oh my gosh, I can't find anything. Right. You can't, because those ingredients don't have anything that are beneficial to the heart. There's nothing in grain that helps the heart. Then these people went back. I had 12 dogs, and they lived anywhere from 18 years to 21 years. They were fed grain free their whole lives. So I mean, 12 different dogs. By the way, the same number of dogs that were in the study.
I was holding back because I was like, wait, you're a study in yourself.
And
Uh,
but I will say it was much longer than 6 weeks. It was years and years and years. But it's like, come on, you're going to have genetic things, and you're going to have, just things that are part of being alive that aren't
yeah.
going to be things that you're going to be able to necessarily affect to the degree that you would like to. It's the roll of the dice when we love something that's living and breathing. But to misguide and mislead people for monetary reasons down a path that is, I mean, I had people losing sleep over it. It was devastating. I was so upset for them because
Yeah,
it
and
just
and
was
that's why
wrong.
we had this discussion today because I
Mhm.
I've had more inquiries coming back, and I don't know if it's because we're you know trade show season again or what, but it
I
is one
know.
of those of I like what you said there too. You do what's best for you and your pet. You know, at the end of the day, you and I have seen. You brought up the animals that are abandoned out there, and hey, anything in, available is what they're going to go to. So, is it the best? Probably not. But,
Keeps them alive.
Yeah, you're still doing what you can, which is better than the alternatives, which could be much worse. So, but having the knowledge also opens up pathways for you to continue to navigate up that trail towards best. And hopefully that's something you got from this discussion today. I know you and I can both go on for much longer, Lorin, but
yes,
I do want to say thank you to everybody. I know they've got busy schedules. Thank you all for joining us this week. I know this is a tough topic. Can't wait for Lorin to read all your emails and thoughts and comments.
Bring them on.
Send those to her at practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Leave a comment below. Share us with your friends. We're on all the different social media networks. We're, at our website, practicalpetchat.com. And yeah, this has been good. I know we will continue to have these types of discussions as we continue to talk about nutrition, foundational basis for building a better outcome, good, better, best. At the end of the day, be you, do what you can, do what you can sustain. Balance over time is something I think both Lorin and I would agree is really important. So if you're going that in one path, look for those fresh mix-ins. I think, to me, that is, especially these days, something that I am more and more of an advocate of and practice all the time. So, yeah.
Yep.
Any last thought? All right.
No, just rotate. Rotate.
Well, everybody, thanks so much. We'll see you on the next edition of Practical Pet Chat.
Bye, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.